Hello and welcome to Normalize It Forward. My name is Mark Lehman. I am a family therapist. And today I have on an extra special guest, Dr. Joe Oravec. How are you, Joe?
Fine. How are you doing,
I'm
Mark?
good. I'm good. I already screwed up your name. I'm sorry.
That
Uh,
is my life. That's why it
but
goes Dr. Joe is the
Dr.
always the
Joe, that's
easiest.
that's a lot easier. Thank you. So Dr. Joe is on tonight, and Dr. Joe is a colleague of mine and a partner in a company that we have formed recently called Legacy Collegiate Specialists that we're both very excited about and here to talk about tonight. So, Joe, without further ado, I'm wondering if I can put you on the hot seat and have you tell us a little bit about Legacy.
Oh my gosh. Well, when you think about being a parent of a student who is navigating high school going into college, people to an extent feel as though "No, we've got this handle, we might need help identifying the colleges and doing that college search. And there's plenty of consultants that do that incredibly well and stop there. Once they are able to find you and kind of saying, we helped you, got in, and we're good. Best wishes to you.
That's right.
Let other people know that we've been successful with you. And full stop. However, what have we recognized and what I've recognized and through our conversation, me being a university administrator and a vice president of campus life and student life and dean of students and retired from there, recognize that the journey just begins
Totally.
with the
Totally.
college acceptance.
Yeah.
And that even the months after you decide, be it May and signing off saying this is the college that I'm going to, and going through all the rituals of graduating high school and everything that's in between the last family vacations, if you're able to do that, to be able to then get ready to what is that going to look like of moving in or how do we start classes and
Moving day.
such.
Right.
All of that, and then the first semester, and
Right.
then the second semester. That there is so much that happens, and there's a flow to that quite honestly, only those of us that have lived behind the green curtain of university administration and know that cycle that I have found working with parents of students in college actually realize I need a lot more guidance because this is
Gotcha.
incredibly hard to navigate what you think is so simple, even if you are a college graduate, just like, oh, this is what we did when we were in college. No longer the case.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And for my listeners, Dr. Joe's being humble here, but he's worked on four different university campuses. He has been in college administration for how long, Joe?
Oh, almost close to 30 years. And
30
actually,
years.
I
Yeah.
think last time I counted as far as from being a director level, but all the way up to a vice president, probably maybe 10 to 12 universities.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah,
So now we
I
got
think
it. Now we
the
got it.
four being at a vice president level.
Got it. Got it. Got it. So Joe and I were talking this past year, and we were talking about this very thing. And the topic came up that I feel like I've said forever in my clinical career. Wow, there's just so much done for students in this journey that they prepare for picking their school. And as you said, Joe, whether it's a consultant or the school, once the graduation happens or the school is picked, there's this like hole, there's this like gap where when families are transitioning with their students to this new school, there's that sense of that I know as a parent I went through with both of my kids. I think I have this, but I really in retrospect did not, and I think that a lot of families are in those positions on day one when they get to that campus for move-in day. And so Dr. Joe and I put our heads together this past year and said, "Hey, we need to join forces. We need to take your experience on college campuses and my years of experience working in practice with kids clinically, because we've seen a lot. We've seen a lot. We've been with
Mhm.
kids and their families through those trials and tribulations." And so many of these families are kind of reactive and they find their way to us after a problem happens. But really, what Legacy Collegiate Specialists is for us to jump in and join and partner with these families, the parents and the student, to give them a sense of, hey, this can go very well with our guidance and our assistance.
Completely. And when you think about what is investment of a higher education degree that you pretty much have a mindset when you're helping your kid through college that I'm like, okay, in 4 years, this is what we've mapped out the plan, the financial plan. We know what that's going to entail and so forth, and we've got that. Maybe if there's additional summer semesters or if there's an abroad experience, whatever that might be, that we've got that for 4 years. And to an extent, I always want then I think for us to be working with families saying, how do you know it's only going to be 4 years?
Mm,
Because when you look at the data, as I have done for decades, that you look at what is the graduation rate of the entering class. So when you're looking at and there is data and we will be able to help families see where that data is to be able to look at it and that you typically when you are searching as a parent and when you're asking well what's your acceptance rate, what's your acceptance rate, I'm like all right fine, that's to get in. What people aren't asking are what's your graduation rate.
mm.
And because it's not 100% people and that's kind of, and are is your child going to be that end of not graduating in 4 years? And this is part of how we can help guide on the front end so that your plan as a parent of you're going to be graduating in 4 years, we can help walk shoulder to shoulder with you throughout the entire journey so that ROI is the ROI and is not going to cost you more.
Yeah. And these days, let's face it, we know college tuitions are really outrageous. And for families, it becomes really, really challenging in many ways, pardon me, to cover costs. So any way to manage that better, I would think would be helpful. I would also say too, Joe, I mean, on my end, clinically, we've seen so many kids go to college without really any emotional history. You know, they may not have a diagnosis, they may have never been challenged.
Mm-hmm,
And then kids
mm-hmm,
go to
mm-hmm,
school and they develop, you know, anxiety disorders and
mm-hmm.
panic disorders and depressive symptoms. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, they don't really know what's going on at first. They get overwhelmed slowly. But within weeks of a semester, they're not only dealing with homesickness, but they're dealing with this other beast that they've never dealt with before.
Right.
And so, you know, those are things again that Legacy is aware of. We've worked with kids like that over the years. We've seen the benefit to that type of assistance, and we've also seen, you know, the decline for kids that don't have that type of assistance. So, you know, what I really want families walking away from in a conversation like this is the understanding that lots of families, most families, approach college to me as a counselor, they'll come back after drop off day and they'll say, hey, you know, I think my son or daughter is going to be okay, you know, and they'll kind of give me the, you know, fingers crossed sign, right? And it's like, well, we're really not sure, and we're kind of gambling with a lot at that point, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And for me, that's where I'm just so passionate that what tools can we help as legacy collegiate specialists to the family to say, okay, you just drop them off. Do you understand what's going to be happening in the next 24 to 48 hours on a college campus with your student? I absolutely do know what that's going to look like. Just tell me the institution. I can help guide you through
Mhm.
that. You will not know how to navigate the college website to be able, or the emails that you're receiving and your student is receiving, because all the resources are going to be there. And so for you, how can we help you as the parent understand what the resources are? Because your kid doesn't have the bandwidth. I mean, right, bottom line, they want to make a friend.
Right. That's what they're
That's
concerned.
it.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
You know, or even more so is if you drop them off at lunch or at lunchtime, who am I eating dinner with? Who am
Right.
I going to walk to the cafeteria and eat with?
Right.
Besides if it's my roommate or whatever, or not, you know, and there's different ways to even navigate that. It's
Mhm.
but this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and to the extent having been there and knowing that, and I want to, and we want to be able to talk to the parents saying, let me look at the university, let me look at the information, and this is pretty much what they have crafted for you.
Yep. Yep.
And to also reinforce for your student, look at all this stuff that is happening, as opposed to a typical when you start asking questions are you making friends? How are your classes going? That you can be able to say, hey, remember, you have this activity, or you have this student organization fair that's coming up on Thursday. It's the process to which, and you from a from a clinician standpoint of being able to even help the family as far as how do we start empowering your student,
Right.
and especially with students that have a diagnosis or not a diagnosis, but hovering. Some will say, well, I'm a helicopter parent. Yeah, it could be helicopter, you could be stealth bomber, you can be snow plow. That's another term that we
Yeah.
used.
Yeah. Yeah.
Snow, clear the way, get out
Yeah.
of my way, I'm gonna make sure that my child's gonna be successful. I'm like, how do we, and there's ways that you want, bottom line is that you want to have the best, create the best possible experience for your student. We want that as well. We want to
Mm.
do that. However, we have the experience so that we can help you leave no stone unturned. Other places
100%.
are not able to do that.
100%. Joe, let me ask a question because as you were talking, it occurred to me like a lot of parents listening to this might be wondering. So I figured, let me just ask you, why is this so complicated? Back when we were in school, this stuff didn't happen, so a
Mhm, mhm.
generation ago, kids figured it out, right? And didn't need this level of assistance. In your opinion, why is going to college so complicated now?
Well, technology is absolutely complicated. Gone are the days, really dating myself, that when you registered for classes, you stand in a long line
I remember that.
in the student union,
That's
whatever,
right.
and hoping to God that you won't be shut out by your class.
Right.
No, and they register early. There's so many different things. So technology has added pros, but then definitely
Some cons.
cons
Yeah.
associated with it. And I think not to the fault of the university, but they're trying to create and understand these different programs and portals and so forth to be able to help students and family students really connect all the dots. And it's
Mm.
always continuously refining. And quite honestly, it is to help a student be retained and graduated. That is the bottom. They don't want a 30% graduation rate. That is
Right.
showing that the investment is not very good. And so they're trying to do their best, but to an extent, because of things rapidly changing from a technology standpoint, that the parents that went to college in the 90s and the early 2000s to an extent didn't have that. And so to be able to draw upon your experience, saying, well, this is what we used to do, and it should be pretty easy if you are not, if you have a couple generations that have gone before you,
Mhm.
that you don't know what questions to ask. And that's where we do. And we can help guide you through the website, or even having a Zoom call with you as the parent, your student, and one of us to be able to say,
Mhm.
okay, let's pull up everything here.
Yep.
Let's kind of walk through that. And to be able to understand, say, okay, I got it. This is what they're trying to do. This is who you need to be able to talk to. Let's pull down the directory. Let me see. This is what they call the office that you would think would be called it, but it's not. And
Mhm.
however, through our experiences, I mean, and again, they're only trying to from their lens. And then, let's look at the syllabus. Let's be able to see kind of, and this is who you need to go to. Again, you're paying for it, and for from a tuition standpoint and fees, and the investment with us is let's maximize that so we are getting what we want in the time to which we want him or her to be able to graduate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was asked that question a few weeks ago, and that's why I brought it up, Joe. And I guess I would add to that tech piece by saying, you and I didn't grow up with these.
Right.
Kids today have. And one thing that I see a lot with kids is that it's impacted their social skill ability,
Oh, completely.
right?
Yeah.
And so here's the thing, and it's kind of a setup if you think about it. You take a kid who's in a school, who's maybe got a few friends and a bunch of acquaintances, and they graduate and they literally hit the reset button. And their biggest concern, as you said, and I see it every single year, kids will comment on it on my posts, and they're all they're thinking about is, can I make a friend? Can I make a connection? Can I be social? Can I? And they get to school and they struggle with it because they
Hmm.
don't have the ability to even, have a 10-second banter, right?
Right.
Because that's
Right.
been lost in their language in many ways. Now,
Right.
you got those kids that naturally know how to do it, but I'm talking about those kids that maybe don't. And I think parents realize that. They understand,
Mhm.
hey, my kid is not super social. My kid, maybe doesn't order meals at restaurants, right? My kid doesn't like to make phone calls. My kid doesn't like to go see a teacher in high school. So how
Mhm.
do you expect those things to go well when you get to college? The fact is that they're going to struggle. And
Right.
some kids,
Yeah.
if you ask them, they know they're going to struggle.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
that's really where we come in. And I think that what one thing legacy does is that we start with a a complete intake and we look at all of those areas that might be strengths and might be weaknesses for them, and then we start to put a plan together along with the family and the student to take a look at, okay, are they a natural socializer? And if they are, great, then we move on and we look at other things that we might be able to assist with. But I think one of the complicating factors of college is that it requires three big things, in my opinion. It requires someone who has independence with academics, which a lot of high school kids don't. It requires some ability to socialize, which we just went over. And it also requires some ability to independently take care of self-care,
Hmm.
which I would argue a lot of kids don't do a
Right.
good job of.
Right.
So, my happiest college kids, they do all three.
Mm.
And those are the kids that go to bed, themselves at home, right? And they get
Right.
some exercise because they understand the
Yes.
benefits. They get
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Those are the kids that you don't have to look at Power School or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
system they have in
Right.
high school.
Yeah.
They just get it done. Like, and you have those kids. But I would say most kids aren't like that.
That's exactly right. That's a minority that have all of that.
Yeah.
And they get out of the gate very, very fast. And I've seen that on a college campus, during freshman orientation. It just you just see.
Yeah.
You see in the team building activities those who is just out there,
Yeah.
who's going for it. And it's a very, very small number.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Uh, I mean, if I don't bet, but I was always like first year, first semester, I was able to see, okay, that students they're gonna be at certain places in certain positions by senior year or whatever. And
Right.
sure enough, when I was calling their name at graduation, crossing that stage, I'm like, yep, nailed that one.
There
So,
they are. Yeah. Yeah.
but it is how do we provide the resources and the awareness to the families to know this is what is out there.
Yeah.
And there are systems in place at the universities to help with the socialization,
Right.
with those self-care. Because the experts on the college campus to which I supervise divisions that help create these, it is tirelessly trying to focus on those that are needing to develop those skill
Yeah.
sets for its lifelong learning. And that's
Absolutely.
completely as far as being involved with higher ed. And even when I did parent orientation at that time, I was just like, college is about learning how to learn.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, I say it all the time. You learn a lot in college outside of the classroom. It's kind of the same
Yeah,
thing,
yeah, it's just
you know?
learning, how when someone says something, how do you quite don't just accept it, and respectfully and to be able to just and how you have those conversations because you don't if you're on that social media. I will have to say also even with the phone is that the fruit doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, clearly even at family orientation, when I see Joey at the lunch, table, when we have families together and so forth, also noticing there's a couple other family members that are on their phone as well. And for me, being the position I was in, I saw it and I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna make that stop. And
Yeah.
and and kind of fly right on in to
Yeah.
an extent. But that is where it is this cycle that the university needs to help break.
Yeah, no
And
doubt.
that's kind of where we also need to understand from the social anxiety and such, how, and from a clinician standpoint, how are we enabling this?
It's a great question. It's a great question. And I think that requires parents looking at their own behaviors a little bit, which is hard.
Right,
It's
of
hard.
course. Of
Um,
course.
I have another question. And Joe, you're being a good egg here because I just want everyone to know I have not run any of these by
No,
Dr.
this is
Joe.
great. Good
He's
authentic.
handling them well. So let me ask you this. You've been on campuses many times after drop off and you've observed a lot. And I guess I'm wondering, I think there's parents out there that would want to know, hey, Joe, what does the first week look like? What do
Mm,
you as the adult bopping around campus and seeing freshmen, what do you see? What does that look
yeah,
like?
and I have to say the flow of from drop off into first day of class. This was after COVID. Um, before COVID, a lot of universities were doing June orientations, overnight orientations, July. A lot of the larger universities were doing that. I wouldn't say the small private liberal arts were still doing it, kind of what I would say old school. Um,
Right
and
before, like, right.
yeah, and so the old school, and this is kind of where now people are universities are shifting back to it, is that drop off happens 3, 4, 5 days before the first day of class. And that is when orientation actually happens.
Got it.
And so it is get them engaged immediately. Don't leave a hot minute by themselves. You need to program that so that what does engagement mean? It might be large crowds at the very beginning, but then we're going to peter off. And if you're living on campus, we're going to do things by our residence hall or by our floor. So it's small,
Hmm.
it's large group, small group, because clearly we know of the variety of personalities and extroverts and
Sure.
introverts. People need time to decompress, just to get to know their roommates too, and to set
Right.
up the room. And so all of this has been, quite honestly, very calculated
Right.
by the student affairs team, by the faculty. So there's ways in which that, and they're so that they are not meeting or being with the same people all the time.
Okay.
It's very intentional to mix them up as well. And it's also, there's a different segment of the arrivals that we always called early arrivals, student athletes,
Sure.
international students, because of preseason, that, well, you'll have some students that, even though move in is 5 days before for traditional freshmen, you're going to have the student athletes move in 3 weeks beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they've already have this cohort,
Mhm.
which is awesome. But I always talk to the athletics staff and the coaches saying, you have a huge responsibility here to be able to, get your teams and the upperclassmen and talking about expectations and values and what we do,
Mhm.
because the parents are expecting that. And they're here for a much more longer time to get to some behaviors that you don't want to have them.
Sure.
So, and
Sure.
I always the coaches were always phenomenal. And I've been at D1, D2, D3 institutions, and so and all have their different flavors. So kind of, but then going into that week, know that you can ask your student, let me see what your first week schedule is, because it will be highly structured. Because we know that as well, they're coming from a highly structured high school environment.
Yep.
And then they're provided by peers, by orientation leaders. This is how you need to start structuring, because what we've absolutely have found is that, as even as a parent, the students, the freshmen, will kind of listen to the adults on campus, but they're really looking to the upperclassmen. Tell me what it is.
Hmm.
So it's kind of for parents, take names, ask who their orientation leader is, who are they identifying, because even asking them the names allows some accountability to start being set and standards, as opposed to, yeah, I don't remember his name. Well, no, this is kind of, and that's teaching a skill set as far as when you network, when you learn, when you get to know people. It's just people resonate to their name.
Yep.
Just an example for that is like, well, does your orientation leader know your name?
Right. 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 Yeah.
Why should they know your name?
Exactly. And your orientation leader, I'm just going even for my own kids. Often they're super kind kids
Yeah.
and, more than willing to connect long after orientation
Yeah.
ends, you
Yeah.
know?
Yes, and then that's significant too because what has out of COVID and that sense of belonging that is such important and connecting that the campuses that I worked on and the dynamic orientation team and the staff, I asked, okay, how are we engaging the or how are the orientation leaders engaging with the students after the first week? Are there meetups? Are there because week one, week two, week three is a different life in the student. And it evolves, and there's all these different opportunities of engagement. And how do you study for that first test, or did you get your first exam back and such? Because you have, again, there's a lot for parents to know that you have high achieving students, and when that first B or that first C comes on in,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're mortified.
Oh yeah. I don't know how to handle it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even going back to drop off, Joe, I remember as a parent, both of the schools my kids went to, and again, I'm sure this is different at every university and college. The schools were rather swift around like, okay, this is the time parents will leave, and it's like, say, see you later, like leave. Like they want you off the campus, they want the separation, and they want
Yeah,
to be able to nurture your kid.
yeah,
And so I know as a parent, that was it felt a little abrupt.
yeah.
And it was a little surprising, probably because I didn't read the emails ahead of time the way I should have, right, Joe? You know, but really
Yeah,
and truly, like
yeah,
I think
yeah,
they've got a job to do
yeah.
with our kids,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
it is. Yes, it is. It's the weaning process that needs to
Right,
happen very quickly.
right.
Some smaller schools or even some larger schools actually have some rituals that take place. Be it, you're going to sign the enrollment book,
Yep.
and then after that, as soon as you're done, then parents are leaving.
Time to go. Yeah.
It's really how do we get that first meal with your peers?
Yeah.
And because that just starts it right there. Say your goodbyes and that is yes in emails setting expectations to be able to know and some definitely here's your arrival time. This is when you need to leave and such or you need to but we allow and knowing that everything needs to be done and completed so your student needs to be in the ballroom, in the
Yeah.
auditorium, in the football field at this time. So that pretty much sets that expectation as do what you need to do to get Joey there and you're good to go.
And you're good to go. Yeah, yeah. I have a few thoughts, and then I want to pick your brain on this as well, Joe. Just a couple of simple tips and tricks for parents to hear that may seem really basic, but I think have big payoffs. The first, for me at least, is getting your high school student to be looking at emails. As basic as that sounds, I can't begin to tell you how many seniors in high school I know that carry their phone around with them 24/7, but don't ever look at emails and don't ever look at calendars.
Mhm, mhm,
Now is the time, as
mhm.
early as you can to get them to start that habit. Look at their email once a day. If they're not loaded on the phone, load it on the phone, make sure they've got it. That's a really simple one, but I think a really big payoff. Second one would be this on move in day. This is going to sound weird, but bring a rubber hammer, bring a rubber mallet with you, right? And Joe knows why. Because, right? Because, first of all, you're moving in and it's probably really hot. So the second thing is bring water.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I would say to you, a lot of times you show up in a room, and this was my experience. So I'll just tell you, you show up in a room, there's at least another family or two, maybe three. So you're talking a lot of bodies. The beds may be, the metal beds, and they may be already sort of put together in a way that you don't want. And as strong as I think I am, I was not able to pull them apart myself. So you need a mallet. You need a
Yeah.
mallet to do that and set up the beds, right? And no one ever thinks about it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
here's something really interesting. If you guide your child to do that, and I've had families do this for years now, they're probably one of few people on the floor that has it. And
Mhm.
what a great point to say, hey, I saw you out of a remote. Can I borrow it? Of course. Yeah. Hey, my name's Joe. Hey, Joe, nice to meet you. My name's Mark. Boom,
Right.
there's an intro,
Yep.
all because of the rubber mallet, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
bring some tools with you if you
Mhm.
hadn't thought of it. other tips that you could think of, kind of quick ones like that, Joe?
I want to, so reinforcing the email and knowing the portal. It is the portal communication to which that is how the university will connect with you. Get used to it, know how to access that because everything will be there. There'll be landing pages and how to navigate that. And typically during orientation, they will teach you how to navigate that as well.
Good.
The
Great
other
point.
piece,
Great
the
point.
other piece to that then is that generally I would say close to over 90%, if not more, of colleges and universities have their own mobile app. That is where during orientation, that students, the orientation leaders should tell you, download it. This is how you navigate it because all of it, your class schedule can be automatically populated. How you your syllabi, all of that can be through the portal, through the mobile
The
app.
mobile app.
So
Oh, great.
it's and parents and there a parent version or so there are parent emails there and that's where the new student orientation new parent and family office will be able to share with you. We will keep you in communication and even they will say Joey's getting this communication this week. Joe and so that you have an understanding as to so just so you are aware here are the questions that you can be asking at this time,
Right. Right.
but you don't know what you don't know to be able to
Exactly.
ask for that. And I do think as far as preparing and living in the residence halls, it is something that with all the websites and all the TikToks as far as how to prepare for your room, it is kind of thinking that, and I really appreciate how you said even the mallet as far as what can you do to be that go-to room so that other people will say, "Hey, is it some snacks? Is it some, even water? Do you typically residence life will be ready to roll with tons of bottled water and such, but that is definitely because even with putting things on walls, there's a lot of restrictions now as
Right.
far as what you
Right.
can and
Yep.
what you can do. And but it is knowing quite honestly then the bathroom situation. Is it a are you in freshman housing? Where there it's just two suites joined by a Jack and Jill bathroom. Kind of how are you going to navigate that? So definitely bringing the cleaning supplies
No
is
doubt.
something to do.
There's a lot to it, Joe, but even like as you were saying, I'll throw another thought out. I've had many students move in on the early side. And let's say they get in at 10 and they've gone through what they got to go through. They set up the room and their parents leave. And the rest of the day, maybe there isn't formal, orientation, but they're there. Offer a hand to another individual
Yeah,
moving in. I don't care if
yeah,
you bring one thing up for them, you're doing them such a service, and believe me, you're making a friend by doing so.
yes,
So just
yes,
just
yes.
recognize that opportunity there, that just because you're in the right place, it's sort of like you're offering some assistance,
Yep,
and
yep.
people always appreciate that.
And with that, generally now that there are these brigades of volunteers in shirts or whatever, that we know that load in, load out is the most stressful
Yeah, yeah,
on everyone. And
yeah.
and the university or college wants to make it as easy as possible. And so even saying that if you're in there early, of just asking one of the shirted volunteers, can I help?
Right.
And they'll say, yeah,
Of
come
course.
on,
Yeah, yeah.
to be able to do that. They would love. So that's a great suggestion, Mark.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. And it's like, even when kids are moving furniture around, most of the time it's a two-person or three-person job,
Right.
so offering some assistance can really be helpful. But Joe, these are just some basic tips and tricks that you and I are very aware of because we've come across them and we've heard about them and we've been involved in some of them. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you said you don't know what you don't know. I think that
Hmm.
it almost reminds me of when 16-year-olds get their licenses and they swear to you that they're the best driver in the world, right?
Right. That's right.
They just don't know. And
Yep.
like, so for the 18-year-old going to college, there's always a lot of worries and concerns, whether they say it or not. There's always with families a lot of worries or concerns, whether they say it or not. And it's a big transition. And that's
Hmm.
where we come in. Legacy
Yep.
comes in. We're able to support. We're able to offer our area, as you said earlier, Joe, our area of expertise to be able to say, hey, we can create a plan for you so that when classes begin, and you alluded to this earlier, Joe, but I want to go into it for a minute, a little bit deeper. They begin quick. And
Mhm.
you have a syllabus class, and then boom, the treadmill starts.
Right.
And for some kids, they haven't been told, hey, your schedule is going to be really different from high school, and hey, you need to commit to like 2 to 3 hours in the library each day, otherwise you're going to fall behind. And
Mhm.
so, because they haven't heard those things, lots of kids within a week or two of classes, they get slammed, maybe a first exam,
Yeah,
you know?
that's yep.
And I end up getting calls, Joe, in my office. I know over the years, and I just want families to hear this. When students get a first exam and they don't do well, a lot of times what students will do is they'll double down and they'll say, hey, yeah, I know I got a 38 on that exam, but I'll do better next time.
Mhm.
That is a formula for anxiety
Right.
right there, right? So what we're really wanting to do is jump in and assist before all of that so
Yep.
that they can avoid that part of the journey,
Mhm.
and we can assist them in a way that really at the end of the day keeps a smile on their face.
Yeah, yes, and with the understanding that we know what to expect,
Right.
and knowing what questions, if you're taking four classes or five classes, how to navigate that, how to set up even your own time management. Because even if with social anxiety, if you're not talking to your orientation leader and so forth, we want to teach you how to fish. However, we know too that there's anxiety in that learning how to fish.
Yep.
So we are able to balance that with here are the resources that you need to make sure are available on your college campus. We're going to help you identify what those are. And at the same time, we need to go slowly but purposefully because that semester is going to go very, very fast.
That's right.
I'll leave a nugget here for people. Don't want to give away too much. Uh, However, it is in some of those first semester courses for freshmen will be you get a midterm and exam and an exam. So with your example that, oh, well, I bombed that one, but I'll make it up.
When?
Really?
Right.
But they don't know. I mean,
Right.
that's again
Right.
that you have 10, in high school you've got 10 tests for
Right.
the first quarter. And
Right.
and so if I mess up one, that's no problem. Yeah. And so kind of that is kind of where again, what are the resources and to be able to set you up and the faculty go over that to an extent with you, but you're just so overwhelmed the easy out, well, no one told me about this.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Well,
And
yeah,
that's
you
and
weren't
that's
ready to
really
hear it.
that's right. That's right. Joe, I have one last question, and I'm curious on this because I think the topic comes up a lot with families. What are your thoughts on FERPA?
Oh, oh, that was when I talked to family orientation and so forth. I was just like, make sure you get that paper signed.
A lot of
Uh,
families might even say, "What's FERPA?"
right.
Right?
Well, that's, and that is definitely where when I just asked the question saying, so let's have a conversation.
Yeah.
And I had the conversation with the students in the room because I said, now some of you might be paying it all from your end.
Yeah.
Or you might have the potential of a variety of different financial aid and such. And so know right now that any and all communication is going directly to your student. Even though you're
Say
paying
that again,
for it
Joe.
all,
Say that
it's
again.
going
That's
it's
important
going directly to your
to the
student. Is
student.
it
Right.
right? And so is that how you want it?
Right.
And
So
they're
let
like,
me let me
no,
let me
no. And I'm like,
let
so
me clarify. If a parent is cutting a check and a parent has a question without a FERPA, they have a question with the bursar will say, I'm sorry.
I need to talk to your student.
And I think for a lot of parents, that's going to come as a shock,
Oh,
right?
it does. Yes. Completely. They're like,
Yeah,
what are you talking about? I'm writing the check.
that's right.
Hmm.
Yeah. So the
However,
rule
I believe that Johnny is, or Joey is 18.
18, right? The rules change, and that's kind of the point. Is I want families understanding and hearing that the rules change. I believe FERPA covers financial, academic, and health.
Correct.
So, I've had scenarios with all three, and families will contact schools and get zero information back because it's considered private.
Right.
So,
The exception, and this is on the personal opinion and practice, not policy practice. of the chief student affairs officer, to which this is what I was.
Okay.
That should there ever be an emergency, I don't care what's on file, we're calling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, and what we're calling first is the emergency contact. Now, that's a significant question that parents need to ask their student. Who are you putting down? Because unfortunately, it became a little bit too much of a pattern and I needed to change our way. I was getting when I had to make a call, the emergency contact was the student's their own cell phone number.
Wow. Okay. Interesting.
And so that's kind of really trying to pull out everything. What do we have? But that is for my personal practice was I don't care. I did always call our assistant vice president for wellness from a counseling perspective to just say, okay, and also my boundaries of understanding client, and counselor clinician HIPAA. I
Privacy,
just
right?
said, okay, are you aware of Joey?
Yeah.
And if I make a phone call to the parent, is that going to cause even more of a worse situation? And I might say, I might hear back, hypothetically, that would be a bad call to make. Okay.
Yeah.
You know,
I
but that
think
was
this
very
is,
rare, very,
yeah.
very, very rare.
Think this is super helpful though, Joe, because in all honesty, I would bet you a very high percentage of families don't even know what FERPA is.
Right,
And so what they end up doing is they write a check. There's a little bit of a, I don't know, mathematical problem. They call the bursar, right? And find out that they're not willing to talk to them. And then they, they get upset. But these are things that again, legacy can help put into place. It's actually not hard to do some of that, but
right,
you have to have, in my opinion, you should have the conversation with your student ahead of time, not the kind of conversation you want to have during a crisis.
right.
So yeah, so that's Joe, that's super, super helpful information. I really appreciate it. And appreciate you coming on today. I mean, I know you're busy and making the time for, my audience to hear us out. And, I'm just super excited to have formed this company with you
Yeah,
and to
yeah.
start working with families sometime soon, probably this summer. Can I ask how can families get in touch with us?
I think the easiest is our website. So, and it's all spelled out as far as legacycollegiatespecialists.com.
Perfect.
And that will be something, and then it's all linked. We have our LinkedIn as well, which is the same thing. And to be able to even, Google that, making sure that you get our names appropriately to be able to then know what the next steps are. And I think once we have that and you make the connection, Zoom conversations and everything, we just want to make sure that families and students are set up for success from day one.
That's perfect. Well said, Joe. And like I said, thanks so much for coming on and explaining some of
Thank
these
you.
really important concepts to families. Because I think, the more information families have, the more knowledge they have of these types of resources that exist, really, the better they're able to, as you were saying earlier, leverage, happiness in some ways for their kids going into college. So thanks again and have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, you too, Mark.